So, when you hear the word penicillin, what pops into your head? For most of us, it's that classic story of a happy accident, right? A miracle drug that just kind of fell out of the sky and landed in a petri dish. But the real story, oh, it's so much messier, more frustrating, and honestly, way more interesting. It's a story packed with forgotten heroes, incredible determination, and a massive global effort that literally changed the world.
And this quote from the man himself, Alexander Fleming? It's perfect. It's exactly the story we all love to believe. You know, the idea of the lone genius who just stumbles upon greatness. It's a fantastic story, for sure. But, and this is a big but, it's only one tiny piece of a much, much bigger puzzle.
The legend, the one we all know, goes a little something like this. Fleming's on holiday, he comes back, finds this weird mold growing on a bacterial plate, and hey, wait a minute, the bacteria all around it are dead, and boom, penicillin is born. It always gets lumped in with other famous happy accidents, like Velcro. You've heard that one, right? A guy's out hiking with his dog, gets covered in burrs, gets annoyed, looks at him under a microscope, and gets the idea for a new fastener. It's a neat story. But with penicillin, yeah, it wasn't nearly that straightforward.
And that brings us to the big question, the one we're really going to dig into here. Was it just a lucky break, pure, random chance? Or was something else going on? Because the answer, well, it changes everything about how we see this so-called miracle drug.
All right, so to get to the truth, we've got to start by looking at the legend. And there's this one famous story that you've probably heard, and it is absolutely 100% false.
I bet you've heard this one. The story is almost too perfect. Fleming's dad saves a young Winston Churchill from drowning. Churchill's father, so grateful, pays for Fleming's entire education. Fast forward a few decades, and what happens? Fleming's penicillin saves Churchill's life during World War II. It's like something out of a movie, right? A perfect, poetic circle. The only problem is, none of it is true. Fleming himself called it a wondrous fable. And yeah, Churchill did get a nasty infection in 1943, but he was treated with something else entirely, sulfonamides. It just goes to show you how much we love a good story, even if it isn't real.
Now here's where it gets really wild. That core idea, the very heart of the Fleming legend, that he was the first person to see mold kill bacteria. That's not true either, not even close. People had seen it and documented it decades before him.
Just look at this timeline. It's pretty incredible. Way back in 1895, that's more than 30 years before Fleming, an Italian doctor named Vincenzo Tiberio figured out that mold from a local well had antibacterial properties. He even published his findings. And crickets. Nothing. It was totally ignored. Then, get this, just 2 years later, a French medical student, Ernest Duchesne, takes it a step further. He actually proves that mold can cure typhoid in guinea pigs. He writes it all up for his doctoral thesis, and the institute rejects it. Why? He was too young, they said, too radical. And the most tragic part? He died just 10 years later from tuberculosis. His work was just lost. Can you imagine?
So that's the big question, isn't it? If other people saw this first, why is Fleming the one we all remember? What made his moment different? Well, the answer is that it wasn't random luck. It was, as the great Louis Pasteur once said, an observation made by a prepared mind. Fleming was looking for this. He was actively, almost desperately searching for exactly what he found.
And that search started in the absolute horror of the World War I trenches. Fleming was a medical officer, and he had a front-row seat to tragedy. He watched soldier after soldier survive these unbelievable wounds only to die from simple infections. The go-to treatment back then was antiseptics. But Fleming did the research and proved they were often making things worse. In deep wounds, they'd kill the body's own defenses, but couldn't even touch the bacteria buried inside. He even published his work in a top medical journal, but nobody listened. You can just imagine the frustration. It drove him and absolutely lit a fire under him to find something new, a magic bullet that would kill the germs but leave the person alone.
And this guy was always looking. I mean, check this out. 6 years before the penicillin discovery, he has a cold. And what does he do? He cultures his own snot on a petri dish, as you do. And he finds something incredible. An enzyme in his mucus was actually killing bacteria. He named it lysozyme. He found it in tears and saliva too. There's this great little story about him paying his lab staff for their tears when they couldn't produce enough just by chopping onions. Now, lysozyme wasn't the magic bullet. It wasn't strong enough. But it proves the point. Fleming was on the hunt. He was obsessed.
So now, let's go back to that moment in 1928.
He gets back from vacation, he sees the moldy plate, and he says that famous line, "That's funny." But you see now, it wasn't funny ha-ha, it was funny, interesting. This wasn't just some random curiosity. It was the aha moment for a man who had spent more than a decade searching for exactly this. He knew, right then and there, that this was the one. This was it. But here's where we get to what might be the biggest twist in the whole tale. Fleming discovered penicillin, but that's kind of where his part of the story ends. He couldn't turn it into a medicine. He was a bacteriologist, not a chemist, and this mold juice, as he called it, was super unstable, really hard to purify. So for 10 years, a whole decade, penicillin just sat there. It was a cool lab trick, a scientific curiosity, and that's it. The revolution was dead in the water.
And this really highlights the huge difference between a discovery and an invention, right? Fleming made the discovery. He found the clue. But it took a completely different team a decade later at Oxford to do the hard, grueling, thankless work of turning it into an actual medicine. They're the ones who solved the case.
And these are the names you really ought to know. These are the unsung heroes. You had Howard Florey, the Aussie leader who just would not quit. Ernst Chain, this brilliant, fiery biochemist who was a Jewish refugee from Nazi Germany. And Norman Heatley, the guy who was the real MacGyver of the group. He was the one who actually figured out how to produce the stuff, using whatever he could find, bedpans, milk churns, you name it. They were the ones who pulled Fleming's discovery out of the dusty archives in 1939, right as the world was about to explode into another war.
And here's a story that tells you everything you need to know about how far off the radar Fleming was at this point. After the Oxford team started publishing their incredible results, Fleming decided to pop in for a visit. And when Ernst Chain heard he was coming, his reaction wasn't, "Wow, the great Alexander Fleming." No, his reaction, and I am not making this up, was, "Good God, I thought he was dead." That's how forgotten this discovery was.
So, the Oxford team had a huge success. Penicillin worked like magic in mice. But now came the scary part, the big question. Could they possibly make enough of this stuff to treat one single human? The scale of that challenge, it was just immense.
Their first human patient was a man named Albert Alexander, a police constable, just 43 years old. And his story is heartbreaking. He'd scratched his face on a rose thorn, just a simple scratch, but it got infected and the infection just took over his body. It was horrific. He was covered in abscesses, he'd lost an eye, he was dying. With nothing left to lose, they decided to give him the penicillin.
And at first, it was a miracle. It was working. Within 24 hours, his fever broke, he was getting better. But then, the unthinkable happened. After 5 days, they ran out of the drug. That was it. The entire world's supply was gone. They got so desperate they started collecting his urine, rushing it back to the lab to extract the tiny bits of penicillin that his body hadn't used and injecting it right back into him. Think about that level of desperation. But it wasn't enough. The infection came roaring back, and Albert Alexander passed away.
That tragedy made two things crystal clear. One, penicillin was a wonder drug. Two, without a way to make tons of it, it was useless. Florey knew that Great Britain, getting bombed every night during the Blitz, couldn't do it alone. So he and Heatley got on a plane to America. And to protect their precious mold, they literally smeared it on the inside of their coat pockets. What happened next was just monumental. It was this massive, all-hands-on-deck collaboration. The US government basically told all these huge competing drug companies, Pfizer, Merck, you name it, you're all on the same team now. Share everything, all the secrets, all the research. It became a race against time, a kind of scientific D-Day. And it worked. By the time the actual D-Day landings happened in 1944, they had made enough penicillin to treat every single Allied soldier who needed it. So, when you put it all together, the real story of penicillin isn't about a lucky accident at all, is it? It's a chain. It starts with a prepared mind, then a brilliant, determined team, and finally, a massive global effort. You take away any one of those links, and the whole thing falls apart.
And what's just mind-blowing is that Fleming saw what was coming next, including the dangers. When he accepted his Nobel Prize in 1945, he gave this warning that is honestly chilling to read today. He basically said, hey everyone, if we're careless with this stuff, if we don't use it properly, the bacteria are going to learn how to fight back. He predicted antibiotic resistance, and that warning, well, it's never been more important than it is right now.
But there's one more piece to this legacy, and it's a big one. This entire thing was built on this incredible ethical principle. Fleming refused to patent his discovery. He believed something that could save so many lives should belong to the world. And the Oxford team, the ones who made it a usable drug, they followed his example. They didn't try to get rich off it. Their goal was to save lives. period.
And that choice, that spirit of collaboration, it leaves us with a pretty powerful question, one that feels even more urgent today. Because the real story of penicillin isn't just about medicine. It's a model for how we can innovate. It's about collaboration and a shared goal for the common good. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our modern world, which is so driven by patents and profit, how do we produce new knowledge? And who, at the end of the day, is it really supposed to serve?